Big names make big moves, and when a steel tycoon like Lakshmi Mittal suddenly leaves one of the world's major economies, you have to wonder why. What triggered this? Today we are unpacking how inheritance tax may be doing more than reshaping books. It may be reshaping borders, fortunes, and the decisions of the world's richest families. In recent months, Lakshmi Mittal, one of the biggest names in the global steel industry, has reportedly shifted his tax residency away from the UK. And while there are always multiple financial and strategic reasons behind such a move, one explanation keeps coming up again and again: the growing burden of inheritance tax and wealth-related taxes in the United Kingdom, the abolition of the non-domicile regime, tighter rules for the ultra-wealthy, and the possibility of the state claiming a portion of one's global estate have all pushed billionaires to rethink where they want to live, invest, and eventually die. So let's zoom out. What exactly is an inheritance tax? Inheritance tax, sometimes also known as an estate tax or a death tax, is a levy imposed on the wealth you leave behind. Either the estate pays it before distributing the assets, or the inheritors pay it on what they receive. The idea is very simple: prevent extreme concentration of wealth within a small number of families and allow society to benefit from large intergenerational transfers. For Mittal and many others, the concern is this: if a country can claim a significant portion of your global estate after your death, what's the incentive to remain a resident there? Especially when you have the option to relocate to countries that have no inheritance tax at all. Across the world, inheritance tax rules vary wildly. Japan, for example, has one of the highest inheritance taxes globally, going up to 55%. South Korea also imposes extremely high rates, and debates continue about reforming its structures. On the other end of the spectrum, you have countries like the UAE, New Zealand, Mexico, and Singapore, where there is no inheritance tax whatsoever, and countries like Switzerland have inheritance tax at the canton level, while others like Portugal have nearly eliminated it for the immediate family. So is inheritance tax a good policy or a bad one? Well, it majorly depends on who you ask. Supporters say inheritance tax promotes fairness. It prevents inherited wealth from piling up endlessly within selected families, and it encourages philanthropy. It raises revenue for public services. It ensures that opportunity is not restricted only to those who are born rich. And in an age of growing income inequality, supporters argue that inheritance tax is one of the few tools governments have left to level the playing field. But critics also say the opposite. They argue that inheritance tax is unfair because the wealth you earned during your life was already taxed as income, capital gains, corporate tax, property tax. Then taxing it again after your death is essentially double taxation. They say inheritance tax discourages family-owned businesses, affects succession planning, and can even force the selling of assets to pay tax dues. Many also argue that the ultra-rich can easily avoid inheritance tax through trusts, foundations, and offshore structures, leaving only the upper middle class to bear the burden. And then there's the biggest argument against it: capital fight. When wealthy individuals simply move to tax-friendly jurisdictions, the policy completely backfires. Instead of collecting more tax, the country loses high-value residents, investments, and sometimes entire industries. This is exactly the concern in the UK right now. When individuals like Lakshmi Mittal move their residency, it isn't just a personal decision. It becomes an economic signal. It makes other high net worth individuals wonder if they should also do the same, and if enough of them follow, the tax base shrinks, the economy takes a hit, and the policy ends up hurting more than helping. Now let's talk about what the data actually shows. According to the OECD, inheritance tax contributes only about 0.5%. Yes, 0.5% of the total tax revenue in the countries that levy it. Why? Because high thresholds, numerous exemptions, and complex avoidance mechanisms reduce its effectiveness. Countries that abolished inheritance tax often didn't see massive revenue losses. Many simply shifted to other forms of taxation, and in countries that kept it, experts argue that unless the system is simple, fair, and loophole-free, it rarely achieves what it promises. So what's the right approach? There is no flawless model, but the most balanced systems tend to have a few things in common. High thresholds so that only the very wealthy are taxed. Reasonable rates so that families are not forced to liquidate assets. Clear rules with minimal loopholes. And predictable policies so people aren't scared of sudden shifts that destabilize long-term planning. Which brings us back to the central question of this explainer. Is inheritance tax justified, or is it simply a penalty for the dying rich? Maybe the real question is much bigger. Because in a world where capital is mobile, borders are open, and the wealthy can relocate at the click of a button, taxation doesn't just influence revenue. It influences migration, it influences investment, it influences where the next generation chooses to build their lives. Lakshmi Mittal's move may be a personal financial decision, but the ripple effects, they go much deeper. As countries debate fairness, redistribution, and revenue, they must also ask themselves, if you tax inheritance too heavily, do you risk losing people who create wealth in the first place? And if you don't tax it at all, do you risk creating a society where wealth never changes hands? In the end, inheritance tax forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. The real legacy someone leaves behind is not just their money, but the choices they make about where they want to stay, invest, and belong. I'm Abhijit, and you were watching DNA Explained. If you found this useful, hit subscribe, click the bell icon, and join us for our next deep dive. Keep watching DNA.